The snow fell gently across the silent expanse of Winter's Grave, a remote village cradled by frost-bitten forests. Beneath the dim glow of an overcast moon, the world seemed at rest, cloaked in the thick, eerie quiet. The air was sharp with the scent of pine and ice, while the only sound was the crunch of snow beneath wandering wildlife. The village existed as if frozen in time, its few inhabitants tucked away in their homes, the warmth of their fires battling the relentless chill outside. In the heart of the village, a single lantern swayed in the wind, its golden light flickering against the swirling snow. It illuminated a small, weathered sign that read, "Winter's Grave, 1886. All seemed calm, yet there was something peculiar. A subtle disturbance. The villagers whispered of strange tracks that appeared overnight, winding deep into the woods, too large for any known animal. A creeping unease settled over the settlement, heavier than the snow itself. And then there was the cold, sharper and heavier than any winter they had known before. Even seasoned residents felt its unnatural bite, as though it carried an unspoken warning. The forest that surrounded them, so familiar yet so foreboding, seemed darker, its edges blurring into the horizon. Somewhere in the shadows, a soft sound like a whisper rose and then vanished, leaving only the haunting stillness of Winter's Grave behind. Naomi Keller tightened her scarf as she trudged through the snow-laden path leading to her cabin. The chill had a way of biting through even the thickest layers, its icy grip a constant reminder of how far she was from the comforts of the city. Her work as a historian had brought her to Winter's Grave, a place most people had long forgotten. She'd come to document its history, a task that once felt straightforward, but now carried a strange unease. Winter's Grave wasn't always a village. Decades ago, it was a mining settlement, abandoned after a sudden and tragic accident. Few records existed about what transpired, but rumors hinted at something unnatural driving the miners away. Naomi, ever the skeptic, had brushed off the tales. To her, this was just another assignment, another puzzle to solve. Yet, as she walked through the lonely village, she couldn't ignore the way the air felt heavier with each step. Her boots sank into the fresh snow, each crunch amplified by the stillness around her. The village was small, consisting of only a handful of homes, a church, and a general store that looked as though it hadn't seen a customer in years. The people who remained were few and far between, their faces etched with the kind of weariness that came from long winters and longer silences. Naomi's cabin stood on the outskirts, facing the dense woods. It was small and modest, with a desk by the window where she spent most evenings. Her days were filled with research, combing through brittle papers and faded maps, piecing together fragments of the past. But nights were different. Nights brought an unsettling quiet that made her feel as though she wasn't truly alone. It began subtly, a missing book she was certain she'd left on her desk, faint creaks in the floorboards, though she lived alone. The villagers spoke little to her, their faces shadowed with fear. "Stay indoors after dark," one elderly man had warned, his voice trembling. Naomi had laughed it off, chalking their fears up to superstition, but instead heard Henry tiny up on the front steps across from her. She couldn't make out his expression in the dim light of the opening door. No door knock. Her door was shut. When she opened it, no one was there, only the biting wind and untouched snow. Naomi couldn't shake the memory of the midnight knock. The unease gnawed at her as she worked. That evening, she ventured into the woods, hoping to trace the origin of the mysterious tracks the villagers spoke of. Armed with a lantern and notebook, she followed the trail, each step taking her deeper into the forest's silence. The tracks were peculiar, elongated, clawed impressions, too precise to belong to any animal she knew. They led to a clearing where the snow seemed untouched by time. At its center lay a circle of stones, their surfaces carved with runes she didn't recognize. Naomi knelt to sketch the markings, her breath fogging in the cold air. Suddenly, the forest grew still. The wind died, and even the distant rustling of branches ceased. Naomi felt a presence, something unseen, watching her. She turned sharply, her lantern casting shadows that seemed to shift unnaturally. A soft sound reached her ears, like a sigh carried on the wind. Back at her cabin, she reviewed her notes, but the strange markings defied interpretation. Sleep came reluctantly that night. At 2 a.m., she woke to a sound, a faint scraping, as though something sharp dragged against her window. Gathering her courage, she peeked out. The forest stared back, silent and impenetrable. The next morning, Naomi visited the village elder, a woman named Marta. "You shouldn't have gone into the woods," Marta said, her voice heavy with fear. "The frost remembers. It keeps what it's owed." Naomi paused for a moment before responding. "What do you mean?" "I mean, for years I have tried to help you, but I could never help." That night, Naomi stayed up late, determined to decipher the runes. As the clock neared midnight, the temperature inside her cabin plummeted. Frost crept along the windows, spiraling in intricate patterns. Then, the knocking began. 3 soft taps, deliberate and measured. This time, Naomi didn't open the door. Instead, she lit a candle and whispered a quiet prayer, her breath visible in the freezing air. The knocking stopped, replaced by a low hum that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Her lantern flickered, and the shadows in the room began to shift. The air grew heavy, and Naomi felt an overwhelming pull to the woods. Grabbing her coat and lantern, she followed the same trail as before. The clearing looked different now. The circle of stones glowed faintly, the runes pulsating with an otherworldly light. In the center, the snow parted, revealing an ancient, frost-covered chest. As Naomi approached, the air crackled with energy. She hesitated but couldn't resist the pull. Opening the chest, she found a journal, its pages intact despite the cold. Inside, she read of the miners' final days, their discovery of a buried artifact, and their pact to seal it away. The last entry warned, "Do not disturb the frost, for it guards what should never be unearthed." A whisper echoed through the clearing, chilling her to the bone. "You've seen too much." End of chapter 13. The frost receded as Naomi stepped away from the chest. She left the clearing, the journal tucked under her arm, her heart pounding. The forest seemed quieter now, almost serene, as though it had released her. Back in her cabin, she lit the fireplace and read through the journal, piecing together the truth of winter's grave. By dawn, the frost on her windows melted and the weight in the air lifted. The villagers avoided her gaze, but she felt no resentment. She understood now. Winter's grave was not just a place but a keeper of secrets, and she had become part of its story. Naomi decided to stay, not out of fear but curiosity. The frost held mysteries that demanded careful study. For now, she would respect its boundaries, knowing some truths were meant to remain buried. As the sun rose over winter's grave, the frost shimmered like diamonds, its secrets buried once more beneath the snow's silent embrace.